everyone, it's Karandi from 100 Word Anime, and today I'm reviewing Arifureta, or From Commonplace to World's Strongest, the anime series. I feel before starting this review that context is a must, particularly for some of my newer blog followers. I am absolutely not the person who believes adaptations should be slaves to the source. I'm very good with new versions of old stories, giving them different twists and adding their own interpretation or flavour, or even just moving material around, trimming it out, or whatever it takes to make it fit the new medium. There's a reason I continue to watch variations of Dracula as they get trotted out year after year. The stories haven't changed all that much, but each version offers some new vision of the bloodsucker, and I can't get enough of it. Netflix's latest 3-episode story was fantastic. It hit the right nostalgia vibes in its first episode, it added some fresh material for episode 2, and episode 3 gave us a new vision and idea attached to an old character. I absolutely loved it. So before I dive into my criticisms of Arifureta, I am going to point out that the fact that it deviated from the source material isn't actually my problem. Sure, I had read the light novels prior to watching the anime, which is a fairly rare occurrence given how few light novel series I've actually read at this point. And I will say it would have been great to see that light novel series brought to life in the way it was written, because I really did enjoy particularly the first volumes of that story. However, the Arifureta anime is bad, mostly because it's just a bad anime. I get that some viewers unironically enjoyed it, just as I kind of like King's Game despite acknowledging it is actually complete garbage. However, none of that changes that fundamentally the Arifureta anime doesn't work. However, broken anime are nothing new. What makes Arifureta particularly disheartening is that given the source material, you have to wonder just how the anime production could end up being what it was. This isn't a case of a new vision or idea for the story, but a definite case where what fundamentally makes Arifureta work as a story was ignored by the anime in favour of getting to the cute girl characters that would look good in promotional images. Or at least I assume that's what their motivation was, given I don't really know what was going through their heads, but I can't think why else they would make the decisions they made. From start to finish, this anime feels like a rushed effort. They keep the extended title From Commonplace to World's Strongest, only then they have Hajime, the central character, transform in the space of about 10 minutes of episode 1. As an audience going in, we have no time to see him as commonplace. We form no attachment to him and feel little for him as he goes through the ordeal of transformation. Then he comes out the other side of this ordeal as a changed person, but the changes have no impact on an anime-only audience as they have no basis for comparison. Certainly other characters who he encounters later in the season, who knew Hajime before, are actually quite astounded at his transformation, but this is literally the only Hajime the anime audience knows. And it really hurts this story because Hajime in his transformed state is pretty much a jerk. Without a context for why or knowing who he was and the full extent of the impact of his transformation on him, what we're left with is another overpowered main character who just seems incredibly selfish. Not satisfied with rushing through the opening arc, the series continues its breakneck pace, introducing Yue, the first of the cute girls, and to the show's credit, she at least gets a handful of episodes to establish herself. However, we are then thrown into another arc that is completed within 2 episodes, and then another and another. Hajime's harem ends up with 5 girls by the end of 13 episodes, with only Yue having more than a one-note personality established. Likewise, Hajime's classmates, and yes, I should mention this is an isekai with a whole class getting transported to another world, barely get enough screen time to be recognizable. For anyone who has only watched the anime, it would be easy enough to believe that they won't even remember more than 1 or 2 of the classmates' names, and they certainly won't understand Hajime's pre-existing relationships with any of these characters. Now again, this isn't a problem because it is different from the books. Sure, all of these characters do get more time and we learn a lot more about them and just have a better understanding of where they're coming from when we're reading the story. However, the problem is emotionally, the anime is asking us to react as if we have some relationship with these characters, but it's done no work to establish that relationship. Seeing the hero falter at actually killing a demon and the fallout afterward has little impact because we've only had the barest glimpse of his personality and the way he has dealt with issues up until that point. Yet the anime seems to frame the sequence as one that should have a profound impact when it just feels like another event Hajime gets caught up in with no more weight than any other because we have no connection to these characters. The rapid pace at which this adaptation churns through its material also had a major impact on the tone of the story and how that came across to the audience. The dark and gritty beginning was fine, but it all too quickly becomes a harem comedy before we are plunged once more into a dark and gritty scene, and then we end on a light harem comedy note. There's little to connect these different tones from episode to episode, and it can feel like you're watching an entirely different story at times. Now on this note, we could actually blame the original source material, with each volume of the light novel kind of having its own tone as the story progressed, but even then, knowing that, the anime could have considered how it was going to deal with the tone to build a story that was actually an enjoyable experience. Now I am going to point out that I still enjoyed watching some of the events that occur throughout the series. Seeing Hajime conquer a labyrinth, traversing the fantasy world, and gaining more and more modern technology as he makes guns, cars, and other weaponry is undeniably cool. Arifureta fundamentally has some great events that occur. Now for pacing, characterization, and tone, we're supporting the telling of his story, the anime could have been amazing. But instead we see glimpses of what is possibly a very good story underneath layers of inept decision making. Still, at the narrative level, Arifureta isn't very different from a range of other isekai stories, so your enjoyment of it will come from whether or not you like the delivery here. For me, the anime failed on delivering the story in an enjoyable manner. Visually, this anime is a little bit of a monstrosity in its own right. Now, I will be the first to admit that visuals don't make or break an anime for me. However, as my style over substance post points out, good visuals can make up for a lot of shortfalls in storytelling. If we look at the case of Arifureta, the early sequences of this anime were just so dark, and not in the this is a dark tone and scary kind of way, but in a I can't see what's happening on the screen kind of way. It was so dark at times it was almost impossible to determine what was actually happening on the screen. Action sequences within the labyrinth were murky at best, and when we could see the monsters, I kinda wish they'd go back to being murky because they were incredibly poorly done. Things did improve once they left the labyrinth and things were better lit and there was just more colour in general, but the early impression of this anime is that it is just pretty hideous to look at. The bottom line for me with Arifureta the anime is that I just had very little fun while watching it. The characters as they were presented in the anime were shallow at best and never became more than their introduction. The pace and tone were poorly handled, really making it hard to ever really get into the story. And the story itself, while it works, the emotional high notes miss their mark due to the lack of characterization. For those who enjoyed Arifureta in anime form, I'm glad you had fun. For me, I solidly do not recommend this anime. There's just too many things about it that fell short, and cumulatively, it just kind of killed any enjoyment I may have had while watching. I'd love to hear your views on this anime or the light novel series, so please visit the blog and leave me a comment. This is Karandi from 100 Word Anime. See ya!